Now, the rest of the story.
Well, welcome back to the rest of the story. I've been dropped down to the tractor driver job, which is actually a pretty easygoing job when it comes to hauling hay in. I can't quite remember everything we've talked about. I know the last two videos I did were kind of ho-hum days. Over $400 for the new window on the Bobcat. I think that's the last video I posted. And we are hauling in the last like 14 bales. We didn't get hauled in the other day, and they're all down at my place, which really makes it simple enough to do it. So overall, I'd say we didn't do too bad. We made 140 bales over 6 different farms. Now, when I say that, this is kind of like the redheaded stepchild of making hay. And by that, I mean the valley was a legitimate field, plus the waterways, because the waterways, when the field was row crop, you know, they were always there. So, I don't know, maybe I should just say the valley bench field was just a field. But then everything else was a combination of waterways. One of the farm's fields was actually, two of them were pasture slash some waterways. 2 of them were waterways. 3 of them were waterways. Because this farm was a combination of field, ground, and waterways. So it makes it a little tedious going around making sure you got everything picked up, because I even came out with the 4-wheeler last night just to re-jog my memory where the rest of these were. Because it's Monday, we made this stuff Friday and hauled it in Saturday. So, yeah. Sounds like people are getting kind of tight on feed. Starting to hear more about people buying CRP. CRP at $60 a ton. The problem is with that is, you think I was giving myself a hard time about overripe first cut. That's essentially what CRP is. Plus with the added benefit of all those weeds and whatnot that have been given the luxury of continuing to grow. So I think that's August 1st, I think, is when they open up CRP. And that's not always a guarantee either. But last year I hear a lot of CRP hay was about $60 a ton. I don't know if it's going to increase at all this year versus last year, because even in southwest Wisconsin, the feed is getting tight. We're in another dry spell. I'd say this is our second dry spell for the year. The first one really didn't hurt us that much, to be honest. It really didn't. I think it benefited us because the roots on the corn and beans actually had to dig down and find those nutrients and get the moisture. This one, we had the moisture through tasseling. We have enough moisture in the beans to hold the beans over for a while. It's once we get to about the 1st of August is when we're going to be needing some of those rains that they are forecasting later on this week, first part of next week. So we are sitting at potentially plus or minus, I'd say 15 bushels in beans if we don't get any rain, and another 25 bushels per acre of corn if we don't get any rain. And the pastures basically been kind of hit pretty hard all year long, and it just seems that they were short early on from the lack of moisture and letting the cows out too soon, depending on who you are, and they just never had a chance to really take off. And now we're getting into August, and the crops just aren't, the pastures are just giving up. I mean, you get to August, everything's pretty well done growing for the year. I mean, I think we're past that growing window, and everything that's going to do something is pretty well done it. Especially pastures, when you have cows that are constantly grazing it. All of my regrowth for hay, all of this stuff regrowth for hay. If it doesn't make anything, a lot of this, we'll just let the cows out to it, and the cows can figure it out and harvest it themselves, save us some wear and tear in machinery and fuel. I've already been kind of approached by some people for selling hay or buying hay from me because they know I have it, but I haven't exactly been too carried away interested in selling a whole lot just yet. For that reason, where I talk to local farmers that generally they do have enough feed to feed their cattle, where they don't typically have to buy hay. And I'm hearing that a lot of those guys, some of those guys, are getting to where they're actually having to start to feed their cattle, and their hay supplies really weren't that overly burdensome to begin with, and they're already talking about like having to chop more corn this year to make up for the lack of hay as it is. And depending on where you're at, this area most definitely has a bunch of winners and losers depending on where you are, as far as where the weather helped you. And there's some guys that are already talking about chopping probably in August, which isn't, for this area, isn't typical. Usually it's about the 1st of September. So, I don't know. If you guys have been watching long enough, for those of you that have been watching long enough, I've made that pretty clear. I've kind of felt like corn, beans, and hay might be worth something going into this year. Which if that's what we can get, I'll take it, because that's not typically what happens. My only thing is I was planning on holding off till about November to really sell much of any hay. But if I can get the price that I'm happy with, I'll take it. So, and a price that I'd be happy with is probably 10 to 20 bucks a ton more than what my average was last year. And the deer is working. I think I have a little bit of footage of that. Really, once you get used to it, it's a nice machine. The foot throttle, I tend to use that a lot, as opposed to like running the Bobcat, where it's just shove it all the way ahead, WFO, and go to work. So we're actually, like Dad and Ryan, they're in the same boat where we're gonna need more, like we're gonna need the next cutting to at least get comfortable, but also too, Dad's cows will be sitting better than Ryan's cows because there's more crop ground down here versus out of my brother's place. So the cows down here, they can graze the field off for XYZ amount of time and reduce the amount of hay I'll have to feed them to get them through the winter. So you gotta start using what you have to your advantage. And we had a couple years there where we weren't letting them out to the field because we didn't really want them walking on the field and didn't want the negative effects of cows, because a cow's hoof, you get 1,600 pound cow spread out on 4 hooves. That's a lot of weight in that hoof spot. So you start thinking compaction is going to be an issue, and most certainly it can be, but the positives outweigh the disadvantages to letting the cows graze off the corn residue and the edges of the fields and whatever else like that. So, and honestly, a lot of this hay we just made here was some really good stuff. And we're sitting at I can't remember everything we made early on. We're at 350 plus 60 plus 40 plus 70, give or take. That's not exact, but then we still have all of our corn fodder we'll have to make this fall, plus all of our second cut, and hopefully all of our second cut's going to equal probably right in that 400 or 500 bales, not including corn fodder. We're probably going to be looking at about 200, 250 bales of corn fodder. I usually try to get the stuff fed up before summer, but if I can get the stuff inside where it'll keep, where the rain and whatever else isn't making the fodder go kind of sour on us, having a bunch of corn fodder to feed throughout the summer to my cows up at the home farm really doesn't bother me too much, because they'll go for that over the hay no matter what I give them. I mean, the beautiful hay, they don't care. So extending my hay, as much as I like having the cows, as little hay as I can get away with feeding them without having the cows go backwards on me is what I'm aiming for. More interested in selling the feed and making as much money off the feed as I can versus having a bunch of cows to sell the feed, or to feed the feed through, then hope to sell it through a cow at a cow auction and hope to make my money back. So the cows are kind of like that recycling program, where if the hay is kind of not exactly perfect, I can go buy some liquid molasses, dumps a jug of molasses on each bale, and supplement them with a little bit of corn, plus the corn fodder, and the cow's actually doing really good. So I really can't complain there. And we are just about done. I keep giving my buddy a hard time about it. About feeding cattle, but I always joke. So you guys are watching the rest of the story. Using the 76 and the bale wagon, one thing that would really speed this along, last thing I'm going to talk about, there's a dealership up in Dodgeville that has the hay wagons that you guys hear me talk about a lot. A 36-foot long JB Manufacturing or JBM Manufacturing. I can't remember that. The nearest dealer I thought we had was out in Iowa, but the fact that we went up and got parts for the rake the other day, and that dealership up in Dodgeville actually had the hay wagons that I'm interested, that I would really like to invest in. I mean, it's $7,500, but 14 bales, 7 bales on a side. It'll be walking tandems on the rear, so like a chopper box like we used to have. Floaters on the back, so we'll have 6 wheels versus 4. I actually wanted to do the dump truck tires, the super singles. Kind of would have preferred to go that way, but 6 floater tires, more surface area you're trying to cover, largely for down at the valley on that soft ground, so it doesn't sink in so bad. But 7 bales to a side, plus being able to stack 2 to 4 on top, and being able to haul even 16 bales with 1 tractor, 1 wagon, versus pulling 8 with this or 8 with the truck. Would have made Saturday go by a little bit quicker too. Fewer trips, and just being able to move more bales at a time. A wagon like that honestly would be kind of like a pleasure purchase. That we can get by fine without it, but man, it would be nice to have something like that. For our hills and everything else, I don't know if I would really trust it fully loaded with the 76 or even the 46, or if I would just go right ahead and make that a summer job for the 8235. Take the duals off, or the front duals off, or whatever else. We wouldn't be roading it that much to really, I would be worried about burning too many of the tires off, or too much of the tires off doing that. But just the weight of the tractor going up and down some of the hills coming out of the valley, because the valley, it's a load coming up out of there, but then you go right back down into a valley to another pretty good hill coming back up out of there. And I think I'd be a lot more comfortable with the 82 versus this or even the 46. The 46 has the weight, but it doesn't have the transmission I would like for doing a lot of heavy pulling like that. Never really did like the quad range, even for going up and down the roads hauling grain, especially after I got used to running a power shift. That's why the 76 is my road runner. So I gotta go because we're done unloading. I gotta go back out and get the last few bales, and then go back outside and worry about putting up with this heat. So you guys are watching the rest of the story. Take care, take it easy, keep in touch. I'll talk to you later.